Good morning, everyone. This is Brent Wilson. I'm the Pioneer Agronomy Lead for the U.S., and I want to thank everybody for joining us this morning. This is a series what we're calling Forward Thinking Farming. It's a series of webinars that we're planning on presenting throughout the year that will focus on topics that we think have value to our customers. And this morning we're focusing in on tomorrow's technology, using that today. And by way of interest, one of the reasons we selected this topic is that I did a quick Google search. Of course, Google is a fountain of knowledge, and digital ag has been a huge change in our ag industry here in the last decade. And I thought it was interesting to note that if you go in and type in digital ag and hit the search button on Google, you'll come up with about 819 million hits on that topic. To contrast that, if you type in corn yield and you hit the search button, you only come up with 62 million. And I think that was kind of insightful to think about. We've been growing corn in the U.S. for over 90 years, and yet we've only talked about digital ag in the last 10, and yet we have 13 times the amount of Google entries for digital ag. So to me, that says there's a ton of information out there. There's tons of questions. There's a fair amount of confusion as far as what works, what doesn't work, how do I apply some of this technology to my farming operation. So our intent today is really focus in on a segment of the digital ag space, and that's around remote sensing. And we really want to share some information with you on what is currently available, what tools you can pick up and use today, how that might deliver value in your farming operation, and really show you some real-world examples of how we can use remote sensing to help you make decisions faster, hopefully with greater precision and more confidence. So we have three presenters that will be carrying the bulk of the conversation this morning. Mary Gumbs is one of our agronomy research managers who actually has some research background in remote sensing. Eric Galdi is our agronomy systems manager, and he helps us manage our drone fleet that our Pioneer field agronomists are using across the U.S. And also T.C. Huffman, who's an aerial digital services manager with our granular group. And T.C. has a lot of experience with hands-on application of digital technology in farming operations. So we look forward to sharing this information with you. Just as far as logistics, we will have the opportunity for you to ask questions using the text box on the GoToWebinar app. So if those that are at computers, feel free to please type in questions anytime you have those that may show up during the conversation. There will also be a series of poll questions that will allow you to engage with our presenters this morning. So please take advantage of that opportunity as well. So with that, I'm going to get to the meat of the matter, and I'm going to turn it over to Mary Gumbs. So Mary, take over.
Thank you, Brent. Good morning, everybody. I'm really excited today to talk to you about remote sensing in agriculture. Remote sensing it's truly an advanced technology using the latest developments in cameras, satellites, unmanned aircraft. But it's also pretty simple technology. It's basically any technology that allows rapid imagery of an entire field. And the exciting thing about this is that we're to the point in remote sensing that it's not so much a technology of the future, but it's something that is right here, right now, that can really help you today in making more profitable decisions on the farm. And what we see from this is that it gives you a way to be faster, cheaper, and more accurate in making your decisions because of the amount of information that you can get quickly about your field situation. We're going to be going through some real-world technologies right now, and in real-time problems, looking at what we can do out in the field. But before we get to those kind of real field incidents, I want to just go back a little bit and talk about how remote sensing works, because knowing this background really gives you the confidence for why this information is accurate and why you can trust it to make your in-field decisions. So what remote sensing does is it measures the reflected sunlight that's reflected by the plants out in your field. So we might be using different platforms for measuring it, such as a satellite or an aircraft or a UAV or drone. but really we're measuring that reflected sunlight. And so we primarily measure sunlight that's in the visible wavelength. So that's your blue, green, and red light that's being reflected off of the plant. In remote sensing in general, we also measure near infrared. And that's a wavelength that can't be seen with the human eye, but we have cameras that are very good at detecting it. And near infrared really changes a lot with different plants and different field conditions. So it's a very useful band to have measured out in the field. And when you look at how plants reflect light, different plants reflect light differently. Different species reflect light differently, and different plants that are under different circumstances in the field, whether they might be at peak moisture or drought stress, or whether or not they're facing nutrient deficiencies, that's going to change how they reflect this light. And there's a couple of places in the spectrum that really change based on what's going on out in the field. So this is a typical reflectance curve. This is for your average plant, how it reflects light going from ultraviolet through the visible light and into near infrared. And what we find is that all plants have a green peak. And that makes sense that you have a lot of green light being reflected, because that's why plants appear green to us, because they're reflecting all that green. And the green peak can change based on the color of the plant. If you have a nice healthy green corn plant, or you've got nitrogen deficiency, and just with different kind of natural colors in the plant leaf. You also have these two spots where reflectance really dips down. And that's because that's in areas where the plant is actually absorbing the light. That's where chlorophyll absorbs the light and runs all the reactions to make the plants grow and get us our yield. And so these chlorophyll absorption bands, they'll vary from plant to plant. They're based a lot on leaf color and also on the internal structure of the leaf. And then finally, at the far end of the spectrum, in the near infrared light, so the light we can't see but our cameras can detect, there's a lot of variation in how plants reflect near infrared light. And this is really influenced by the condition of the crop, the leaf area that's out there, the leaf structure, and the canopy architecture. So if you have plants that are very green, very healthy, very upright, they're going to reflect a lot of near infrared light compared to a plant that is drought stressed or short and lacking leaf area. And so it can really tell us a lot of information about the health of that crop. So nobody wants to sit and look at a graph like this all day of every single part of their field. So in order to make this technology more useful, we usually use reflectance ratios and use those as an indicator of plant health. And it's just a way of taking the numeric data that we get on the light that's being reflected, and we put it into an index that can be shown as a picture. And that makes it a lot more useful to use. Probably the most widely known vegetation index is the Normalized Difference Vegetation Index. This gets seen in a lot of articles. You've probably seen these pictures before. When you look at an NDVI image, a lot of times it looks kind of like a yield map, because we've gotten into the convention of where NDVI is poor. We'll show that in red, and then we'll show the healthiest parts of the field in dark green. And so the way that this ratio works is that, like I said, depending on the health of the crop and the condition of the crop, there's changes in how much red light and how much near infrared light are reflected. So if you have a healthy leaf, you've got a lot of near infrared light being reflected, you've got a high NDVI, it's close to 1. In a stressed leaf, your near infrared reflectance drops, and in a dead leaf, it drops even more, so that it's almost equal with the red reflectance. And by using that ratio, we can come up with an image of overall how healthy that crop is. So NDVI is really useful in telling us in one snapshot in the field the good parts of the field and the bad parts of the field. However, it's not really good for telling us what changed between July 1st and July 20th, because it takes a massive change in crop canopy to alter the NDVI number. So instead, what we've moved to, and what T.C. Huffman is going to talk about a lot more, is a ratio that we use in granular imagery called the wide dynamic range. And what this does is this uses all 4 bands of light that we're measuring, blue, green, red, and near infrared, puts that into a ratio, and it lets us tell very subtle differences between a healthy leaf, a stressed leaf, or a dead leaf. And not only can we tell those very subtle differences, but those differences change quite a bit in time. So we can see the differences between the first week of July and the second week of July in an image, and really get you up-to-date information to make a decision in the field right then and there. So platforms for remote sensing have changed over the years. This is a picture of the first Landsat satellite, Landsat 1, which was launched in the 1970s. And this really started the era of remote sensing in crops. This was a big deal. We could get our first looks at how the overall U.S. corn crop was doing. And it had an imagery resolution of about 200 meters. So it was our first picture, but it wasn't really scoped in yet. As we moved into the 1990s and early 2000s, we moved to fixed-wing aircraft for a lot of our remote sensing. Cameras were mounted on a small aircraft, and they flew with better, smaller cameras to measure reflectance of the crop. And the advantage we got there was we weren't locked into a satellite schedule anymore. We could do this on demand in our fields. Today, we've really moved on to new platforms that give us the best combination of frequency and accuracy in our field. You can see there on the left-hand side, we have pictures of planet constellation of satellites, which TC will talk about more. So we've got multiple satellites up there that do very rapid imagery of the entire Earth on an almost daily basis. So we have very high image frequency. And you can see our UAVs, which Eric Galdi is going to talk a little bit about more about our UAV capabilities, that can go straight to an area of a field and get a very up-close view of what's going on. Before I move to T.C. Huffman, I'd like to do a quick poll question, just to find out how many of you are already using some of this technology in your field. Lance, can we go to our first poll question?
Yes, Mary, the poll is open. The question is, have you used any form of remote sensing on your farm in the past? Please select one of the answers, either yes or no. All right, the votes are in. Share with everyone. So you have a very progressive group here, Mary. We have 100% of the respondents saying yes, they've used some form of remote sensing on their farm in the past.
All right, that's great to hear. This is a pretty exciting technology, and I think it's really the new way to make our decisions. I'm going to turn things over to T.C. Huffman to talk more about Encirca and granular imagery.
Thank you, Mary. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. So I was going to take a few minutes to cover some of what we've got today when we're looking at our imagery component. I'm going to move into our newer product, which is Granular Insights, which we released this summer and will go into wide scale usage in the season for 2020. One thing that I wanted to cover, and Mary covered part of this and kind of alluded to it, is the fact that not all imagery is created equally, and where the imagery is coming from and the system that is being used is going to differentiate between them, just like any other tool or any other thing that you would purchase, whether it's a cordless drill or a planter or whatever. Each tool is going to be a little bit different depending on the manufacturer, who you get it from, warranties, things like that. So imagery opportunities are the same way. So for our Granular Insights product, we're partnered up with Planet Labs. Planet Labs has over 160 satellites up in our constellation that we're using right now. And really what that means is the frequency of images that we get. So if you think maybe 8 or 10 years ago when we started using satellite imagery and people started talking about it, you might get one image every 2 or 3 weeks. And then if cloud cover happened to be a problem, then you wouldn't get an image for that time. And you might go 2, 3, 4 weeks without getting an image because of only a few satellites up there, maybe 5, maybe 10 up there orbiting the Earth. And then all of a sudden you don't get usable images for weeks at a time. Having this many satellites up there allows us to get a usable image often every 2 or 3 days. So a couple times a week, we're going to get a new usable image, which just means we get a better picture throughout the season. I don't always need a new image every 2 or 3 days, but having that option means that I have more opportunities to catch the fields when there's not a cloud over the top of it. So I get more useful images throughout the season, which means I have more opportunities to make a good decision for my farm. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we talked about was the, Mary covered a little bit, was the difference in the reflectance ratios. So the reflectance ratios that often that are being used in the industry are NDVI, which do a very good job up to a point. We've switched over to our wide dynamic range, and the reason for that is because it gets more accurate, up to 3 times more accurate when we get to canopy closure. So when we get to this time of year where we have a full canopy out there and we have a lot of leaf surface, we get a much more accurate picture of what's going on when we're using this wide dynamic range, and that allows us to have a more clear picture of what's happening in our fields, especially later on in the season, so we can make some quicker in-season determinations. The other thing that separates imagery is would be the resolution that you're getting. So depending on what company you're working with, you might see anywhere from 3 to 5 to 10 meter resolution. The tighter resolution that you can get, the more you're going to be able to pick out things out in your field. So Granular Insights is going to use a 3 meter resolution, which gets us a more clear picture of what's happening in the field. Maybe not enough to pick out row by row, but we'll have enough to be able to pick out planter passes and things like that throughout the field. Next slide, please. So one of the important things about having imagery or having remote sensing tools is making sure that we utilize them. Oftentimes, we have these things and then they become a nice to have, but then what are we going to do with them? How are they going to make us money? At the end of the day, that's really the answer that we have to come to is they either have to help me make more money, protect my yield, or become more efficient in what I do. Those are, time and money are 2 very valuable commodities that we have as individuals. So how do we help protect those? So Granular Insights has got some really neat new technology that is going to make it really helpful for us throughout the season. So if you've worked with imagery much in the past, and I alluded to, we might get 2 or 3 images a week on each field. And let's say I have 40 or 50 fields. It becomes really difficult for me to sort through 100 to 125 new images a week and figure out changes and what's going on. So one of the things that we've added in Granular Insights is we're going to now have an alert system that's going to tell us where we've had change. So we've got what's called a Scout Priority Index, which gives me a weekly update of my images that says this has changed in your field. These fields have seen the most change in their vegetative index. These are the fields maybe you should prioritize scouting. So now I can be a lot more efficient in my time, and I know where I need to go and what to do. So if you're looking at the picture on the screen, the yellow area is some sort of a problem, potentially drowned out area with the year that we've had through my geography. The darker the color into the green into the blue, the better the vegetative index. So it's going to look at that, and it's going to look at that over time, over the last 7 to 10 days, and tell me what fields have had the most change in that. And then also look at the crop progress throughout the last 15 to 20 days and give me an index there. It will combine those two, run it through our algorithm, and then give me a scout priority that then lists my fields as you see over here on the left side and tell me which fields that I should prioritize to go scout. So now instead of having to go look at 30, 40, 50 fields, it's telling me which 5 or 10 each week maybe I need to go check out if I have a problem. Next slide, please. The other way that I found that we can really make things more efficient is being out in the field. So we have what we like to call our blue dot technology, which basically is the GPS on your phone. So as I pull up my image with my phone and I look at my blue dot, it's going to tell me where I'm at in the field. So when I pull up my image and I see where I'm at and I go to walk out through that field, I can now go to the areas of the field that I need to prioritize to scout. My yellow areas, my dark blue areas. Those are it's going to tell me where to go. So if any of you have been out scouting corn like I have in this time of year when it's 7 foot tall, it's tasseled, it's 95 degrees, it's really good if you know exactly where in the field to go so you can see what you need to see and see the differences. That way you can do an efficient job of being out there scouting the field, seeing what you need to see, and then coming back and getting a good understanding of what's happening in the field and what has happened and what that image is telling you. You know, I can't stress enough how important it is to use this technology and utilize it, because just having it but then never looking at it is really a waste of your money and your resources. So if I don't use this to actually help make decisions and help learn what's going on in the field, I've really not gained anything from it. Now, you know, these type of tools can really help us be more efficient, but there's times that we're going to need to take it to another level, and that's where often the drones and some of the technology that we've developed with drones can come into play. So Eric Galdi is going to share next around drones and some of our drone technology, and really let you see how you could take what we do with satellite imagery and then how we at Pioneer take it to another level.
Thanks, TC. Morning, everybody. So as you just saw there from TC, that satellite imagery is a scalable option for your operation and helps provide timely information about performance on your fields. Before we look into how UAVs are being used to help speed scout your fields based on changes in your Granular Insight satellite imagery, Lance, can you please key up the poll so we can learn how today's group of individuals are utilizing UAVs, drones today?
All right, Eric, the poll is open, and the question is, how do you utilize UAV drones on your operation today for field scouting? Select one of the answers. You own a drone, you rely on your Pioneer agronomist sales rep, you rely on retail co-op, you rely on a crop consultant or other trusted advisor, or you are not utilizing a drone today. All right, the results are in, Eric, and sharing it with the audience. So we have 18% that say they own a drone, 55% they're relying on Pioneer agronomist or sales rep, 9% with crop consultant or other trusted advisor, and 18% are not utilizing a drone. And we have no one indicating that they're getting this from retail or co-op.
Great. So wide range of audience participation today on how you're utilizing drones for your operation. So as TC mentioned, to provide another tool for the Pioneer Agronomy team to bring extra value to your operation, Corteva Agriscience has trained and equipped our Pioneer Agronomy team with small unmanned aircraft systems, commonly referred to as drones or UAVs. This fleet of UAVs actually makes Corteva have the largest owned fleet of UAVs under a single entity worldwide. The UAS program started in Pioneer Research Organization to collect data on new genetic performance in an efficient manner. To gain knowledge from this experience, we recently expanded the technology that we developed in the research organization to the sales and seed production areas. Similar to how new products graduate from research and move through the seed production and sales process to make their way to your operation for you to plant and utilize, we took kind of the same method on the technology that we've developed with using the drones. The agronomists who visit your operation today and fly are FAA certified UAS pilots and attend an internal training program to ensure they understand how to safely operate the UAV when they're flying your fields. As we move into the next slide, let's look at an example of how the team is utilizing our UAVs with growers like yourself to conduct early season stand assessment. Each spring, how often do you find yourself asking, is your stand of corn or soybeans on your operation at the right population that you targeted when you were out there planting? The decision to plant when conditions maybe just weren't perfect impacts your stand? Today, the Pioneer Agronomy team have the capability to utilize an internal program to evaluate the fields you're questioning on stand establishment. The software is able to provide the agronomist the ability to fly your fields in a quick manner, typically 10 to 15 minutes for a 40-acre field, and can identify areas of the field where the stand establishment may be a concern. On the next slide, we'll dive into what the results look like, which are provided at the field edge for the agronomists when they complete the flight. Each image taken provides you 1/110th of an acre view of this area of the field, and you have the ability to see the plants identified with the red X on them, yellow boxes around different areas in the field where gaps were identified based on a threshold that fits your management practices for your field. Each image evaluates your field at 100 times greater than the traditional manual stand assessment practices. So this provides you better information to make better decisions real time. This year's stand assessment provided customers the ability to identify where tillage, fertilizer, and wheel traffic impacted stands in their fields, helping them make more informed decisions for future fertilizer applications and understanding how their stand was standing up to this year's challenging weather conditions. So that gives you a little bit of information about what we can do at an early season standpoint. As we transition to the next slide, we're going to start looking at, as the season progresses, how we start utilizing our UAV in conjunction with granular insight imagery and how it becomes even more important. Granular insight imagery, as TZ mentioned, provides frequent update on crop health on your fields in an easy-to-access mobile app. If you notice the changes in your satellite imagery in an area, how do you then start to learn what is really going on in that area of the field? Many times, the Pioneer Agronomy team can review the satellite imagery and help you identify the root cause. However, in some cases, utilizing the UAVs to provide the agronomist to get a bird's eye view of the crop condition is important. It helps them be able to fly and go out to those areas of the field and take a closer look. It becomes especially important when we get later in the season, the crop is above head height and really hard to see overall what's going on. Through our partnership with Drone Deploy this year, we have software that we've provided to the agronomy team to be able to provide real-time stitching of the video feed from the UAV camera, allowing the agronomist and you to discuss if an area of the field needs to be sampled, a management practice implemented, or if a close-up investigation is needed. After completion of the flight, a plant health evaluation based on the light reflective from the images captured by the UAV camera can be reviewed and used to aid in making recommendations to the field. As we move over to the last slide, just want to show you overall that by combining the frequency of granular satellite imagery, our UAS scout and get a closer view of what's taking place in your field, and your Pioneer agronomist knowledge, the Pioneer Agronomy team can help make take your operation to the next level of success. At this time, I'm going to turn it back over to Mary to provide examples from the past 2 growing seasons to help you think about how these 2 tools can really be important on your operation.
Thank you, Eric. I think one thing that all 3 of us have tried to echo today is that these aren't just nice pictures for you to be able to take a look at and say, oh, gee, that's great. I got a picture of that. These are really in real-time decision-making tools that are there to help you make more money and make the right management decisions on your farm. So I'm going to be going through some real-world applications of how we've been using this technology. And my first one here is a good example of how to delineate different management zones and how well things show up in both the granular satellite imagery and also the drone deploy technology. And the reason this is important is because the granular satellite imagery shows up multiple times per week. You've got it in very, very real time. You don't have to wait for somebody to come out to your farm with their own drone to fly it. You've got this on your phone basically 4 times a week at least. And so you can see what's going on out in the field. And this was a field out in Oklahoma that you can tell that northeast quarter of the field really looks very different. And after looking at this field and talking to our customer, we realized that the northeast corner was a pasture that was broken out about 15 years ago. It's got an organic matter of 3%, while the rest of the field is only at about 1.5% to 2%. And when we fly this with the UAV, the image is very, very similar. And so that really gives you the confidence in that granular imagery to that, yes, this is showing what's going on in the field. I can rely on this for information, because when we ground truth it with another small aircraft, we get the same information. Here's another picture of a wheat field from earlier this spring where they had a hailstorm on April 27th. And so we looked at the image that was captured on May 4th, and the change between the April 27th and May 4th images. You can see not only where the extent of the hailstorm and the hail damage was, but also you can see how quickly that change shows up. So between April 27th and May 4th, you see the damage done, you see the extent of it, you see the change. And if there was a management decision to make there, perhaps taking out that stand and planting it to another crop or something like that, you would have that information in real time to make that decision. In addition to that temporal frequency, you can also see really pretty subtle differences on a smaller scale out in the field. This is a field in central Illinois, which had a bad windstorm come through in early July this year. And the field was planted to 2 different hybrids. One of them, the Pioneer hybrid, is standing very well. And one of our competitors went through a lot of brittle snap. So you can see that even though it's about a half planter width that we've got out in the field of the different hybrids, you can see that pattern very, very clearly. So it does show differences on a small scale out in the field and shows them in real time. So this is something where, unfortunately, there's probably not a management thing that you can do to make this better, but this gets you ready for harvest and what you're going to need to do a timely harvest in this field and get as much of the grain as possible. And this is really made possible by how often these images are available, which you can see down in that left-hand corner, that we've got images from July 8th, July 9th, July 10th, July 11th, and so forth. Some of those images on those dates, you see a little cloud symbol next to them. That means that there was cloud cover on those days. So that clouds are kind of an unavoidable part of satellite imagery, but we make up for that by taking an image almost every day. So even though the July 9th image had cloud cover on it, the July 10th image was clear. This is a very real-time example of using our drone technology for doing stand assessment. Eric talked about our Isaiah application for doing a stand count. And you can imagine that this year in 2019, with all of the rains we had and our terrible weather and tiny planting windows, there were a lot of stands that were pretty variable out there. And the decision about replanting or not replanting was something that was on a lot of people's minds. Do we stick with the stand that we have that's in the ground and coming up, or do we take the chance that we might get another window to replant it? And so here we use the available Isaiah technology to do stand counts. And we found that, yes, in the worst cases in the field, there were some stands down in the 14 to 15,000 range. But really, a lot of the field was in the mid-range, 23, 24,000, and even going up to 28,000. So there was a lot of the field where we really had a good stand and did not need to take the time and effort to replant anything. And the agronomist who did this also went and took a drone deploy image of that area as well. So he was able to confirm that the better crop health in the areas of field where there was a better corn stand, and really help the customer make this decision of, no, I don't need to replant out here this spring when time is incredibly precious. I'm not going to make the decision to tear up this field of corn and replant it. So it was the decision that saved him time, saved him money, and was really a pretty accurate decision. So this field is kind of an interesting case. So this is a crop health investigation over in Ohio. And this shows us a change that really might not have been detected just with regular scouting. If you look at the image on the left, we've got an image from June 21st of this year. And this is P1197 AM that was planted. You can see in that north part of the field that we're looking at, we've got that dark blue, nice, really high crop health, and it looks really good. So on July 9th, 2 weeks later, all of a sudden that dark blue is changing a little bit, and it's changing to kind of medium health, and you can see that area on the west side of the field that's bright yellow moving to low health. What on earth has happened in those 2 weeks that's going on out there? And not only in the granular tool, not only can we see the imagery from different dates, but we can look at the change between the two of them. And so you can see that northwest corner, man, there is something going on there. Negative change in crop health. What is going on? Now, this is something that, given the spring, given how hectic it was, would you have found that on your own scouting? Maybe. It's fairly close to the field edge, but maybe not. Here, you have it plain as day that this is a part of the field you need to go take a look at. So our agronomist followed up with this customer, took his drone out, and took some aerial imagery. So we've got the direct aerial imagery on the left-hand side, and then the drone deploy crop index on the right-hand side. And you can see visually there's something going on out in that field in that west side, and shows up plain as day in the drone now. So when you get this, it's alerting you to the problem. It's not telling you what the problem is yet, but it's letting you direct your time and resources to that area of the field that you need to take a look at. Lance, if we could go to our last poll question. Before we get into what the agronomist found, I want to find out what everybody thinks might be going on in this field.
All right, Mary, I'm going to read the poll question before I open it so people can look at the image while they're formulating their opinion or answer. So what do you think is happening in the northwest part of this field? Is it wind lodging, herbicide damage, insect damage, or drought stress? So the poll is open now, so select the best answer. All right, results are in, and I'm sharing with the audience. Mary, we have 64% say it's wind lodging, 9% say it's herbicide damage, 18% say insect damage, and 9% say drought stress.
All right, thank you, Lance. So those of you, the 18% of you who said insect damage, you were actually right here. But the point is, without going out to the field, you probably wouldn't know what was actually causing this damage. It turns out that it was a very uncommon problem for Southern Ohio, and that it was corn rootworm damage. So this had been planted to a double stack product, 1197 AM, and we're actually seeing some rootworm feeding out in this part of the field. So here's a case where the aerial imagery didn't diagnose the problem outright for us, but it sent us to the right area of the field to diagnose what is probably going to be a long-term problem, but has an easy solution to it, to plant a rootworm-treated corn here. So again, it's making us faster, more accurate, and saving us money here. Another example of how this technology was used this year is in irrigation monitoring. These are some fields from the Western Corn Belt, and you can see here imagery of that pivot run in the field on the left. You can see some areas where we're having some issues with the water well lined to the pivot, not having good pressure. An area on the eastern side of that half circle where the pivot is still walking but without water pressure. And then some areas that just show kind of a lighter soil in the field that we're getting irrigation on, but the soil's a little bit lighter. We can also pick out an area where P1366 was planted, that it looks really good there. So this is information that you probably wouldn't get otherwise until you looked at yield maps in the fall. You need that aerial information about that pivot. And this is a whole lot easier than walking the entire pivot line and looking to see which nozzles are plugged and which ones are working. On the right-hand side, you can see very similar information as well. An area in the field in the southwest part where it didn't get water, some water line issues. And then that area up in the northwest corner where we have the best canopy so far and the irrigation is working very, very well. So I'd like to walk you through a decision right now in a field that's happening right now in real time. Sometimes the agronomists get called a lot for what went wrong in a field, or we use these images to look at, what was the problem, what's going on. But really, this technology has a lot of utility in making decisions in real time. So here and managing a field that is a very good field for maximum yield potential. So here we have a field managed for entry in the 2019 NCGA contest. It's P0574 AM that was planted on May 17th. And as we look at this field, it's a high yield history field. So it's undergoing continuous monitoring for crop health, nitrogen, and a possible fungicide application. Given the terrible early spring weather, is this still an NCGA contest field? And are late nitrogen and fungicide treatments warranted? So as we look at the field progression in its early growth, we've got on the left-hand side a May 5th and June 3rd picture. We can see overall health of the field is really pretty consistent. This is a field that it would have been planted with a headland on the east side of the field. That's where the farmer started planting. So we've got a little more traffic on that side of the field. So we look at things and through June 3rd, they're looking pretty good. Then all of a sudden, as we go into the later early growth, June 21st into July 4th, that east side of the field where we do have the headland is starting to look a little rough compared to the rest of the field. So there's some things going on out there. as we progress to see what's going on in the pre-flowering time of July 4th through August 4th, we've got a good block of strong crop health in the middle of the field. But again, that headland over on the east side of the field is really still showing a lot of variation and maybe some poor drown out parts. So as we look at those pre-flowering pictures, I've got the actual crop health pictures on the top of the screen here from July 4th, July 25th, and August 4th. And then down below, I've got the changes that are going on out in the field between the first and second and third days. So we have kind of that in that first change photo, we've got excellent crop growth and an excellent area that's really staying very stable. That white and light green is really no change in the field. And we're actually seeing a bit of a positive change up in the over in the headlands on the east side. And then in that second change window, we're actually seeing a positive change across the entire field, even though we are still seeing that variation in absolute crop health on the east side of the field. And what that tells us is that we're experiencing positive change. There is variation out in the field, but this is certainly a good field that is still well in contention for being an NCGA contest field. And it looks like there's a very clear area of what should be harvested for the contest. In this field, the agronomist followed up to do some drone shots looking at the crop health changes. And so you can see that actually the area that was originally drowned out due to the late wet spring on July 29th, that area has actually shrunk quite a bit on August 6th. So we're looking at good crop health in this field. And then when she followed up also over the rest of the field that's showing strong growth in blue, you can really see the strong plant stand and good crop health through the rest of the field. And again, that image on the right is from August 6th. So when we get back to the management decisions, looking at what's going on in that field, you know, we've got improving plant health in the majority of the field, excellent yield potential overall. We do have some bare spots in the field, but those are in a relatively contained area. So as we look at, this is a yield history of 280 bushels plus. It's been managed before as a contest field. NCGA status is really on track. And when we look at the images down here, actually the left-hand image is from 2019, and the right-hand image is from 2017, the last time this field was in corn. So in this Encirca tool, that's going to be the granular tool, you have the ability to look at past years of imagery as well and see how the imagery compares from year to year. So you can see 2009 is really tracking pretty well with 2017 in imagery, and 2017 was a very high yielding year. So this field is really on track to stay as an NCGA contest field. If we think about some of the real-time decisions, looking at maybe a projected price per bushel of $4.30 or so, approximate cost of fungicide about $25 per acre. Well, PO 574, we know from our internal data that 70% of the time we've got a yield increase of about 9.4 bushels. And I have question marks on possible fungicide increase because we're finding that highly managed fields where there's a lot of potential to begin with, oftentimes have an even bigger yield increase and really respond to that. So I think we've got the opportunity for a good response to fungicide. As we look at the approximate cost of late season nitrogen, say about $10 for application and another $20 worth of urea, so $30 per acre. Are we going to get at least 7 to 8 bushels return on putting on some late nitrogen. And I would say that definitely we're in that greater than 10 bushel potential. So we'd answer yes on the additional nitrogen application. So not only does this technology let you go through and make some management decisions in fields that are on the edge or where something's going wrong, this can really help you in your decision making in your very best fields as well. So just to sum up, remote sensing is a technology that's really coming into its own. And today's science has a lot of options on the farm. We're not at the point anymore of, oh yeah, in a few years this is going to be really good. It's really good right now and really has a place in your decision making. And it's really going to increase your efficiency to be faster, cheaper, and more accurate in your decisions. It doesn't make the decision for you, but makes your decision that you're going to make better informed. So you have the opportunity to learn more about Granular and Pioneer's UAV fleet from your Pioneer agronomist or sales professional if you're interested in doing that. And TC, are you still on the line?
Yeah, I'm still here, Mary.
Okay, if somebody was interested in in looking at the imagery from their field, how would they go about getting that?
You would work with your Pioneer sales professional or your Granular agronomy service agent and work with them on finding out how you would get imagery for your crop and for your fields. Coming next year, as part of the Pioneer program, we're going to be able to utilize this Granular Insights tool as part of your Pioneer purchase if you qualify at the right level of Pioneer purchases for 2020. So definitely make sure you ask your local rep about that as well.
Okay, thank you, TC. We're going to open this up for any questions. Those can be entered through the question box. But before we do that, I need to give a big thank you to my entire field agronomy team. And they sent me a lot of great imagery from across the country that I used in this presentation. So thank you very much to John Mick, Clint Dotson, Jake Becker, Paul Yoder, Troy Putnam, Karen Zuver, Ashley Storby, Alex Peterson, Jonathan Ross, and Kevin Fry. Without their help, this webinar would not have been possible. So thank you very much for attending today. Be glad to answer any questions that you have.
All right, audience participants, if you have a question for any of our speakers today, please use the questions tool for the webinar software, and we will answer those for you. Are there any questions from the audience? All right, Mary, I'm not seeing any questions from the audience.
Okay, well, I'd like to just thank everybody again for being here today. We really appreciate you giving us an hour of your time, and we're here to help you with your crop management decisions. So thanks again.